Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Let's Talk Arsenal series, joining you on a Friday at 6 o'clock. What a flashback this is. We used to do these shows on a Friday quite regularly at 6 p.m, which is kind of our just discussion Q&A session. But with the way the world is and with how crazy work is, that's kind of fallen away. So it's quite nice to sit down on a Friday afternoon and have a chat with you guys about a topic of discussion. And today's topic goes around the idea of Nicolas Pepe and specifically the right wing position at Arsenal. We're going to get into that and a lot more in a second. We're going to say good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be joining us from today. Gooner Taj, good evening, good morning to you. Paul, good evening. I hope you're doing good. Tom Barnett says, actually made it for a live show for once. You'd best make it a good one, otherwise I'm getting heckled. This I'd love to see the attempts at heckling from a text-based chat box, but you know, never tempt them, as they say. Rob, good evening to you, my friend. Trag, good evening. Good evening to you, Taj, as well. I think I've already said good evening, but again, it works just as well. Temi is not happy with the idea of today's topic of discussion. Steve Stone, I hope you're doing well, my friend. Matt Thornton as well, and Mr. Ginger Gooner, and plenty more as well, joining us in the chat box. Thank you so much for continuing to make this part of your viewing pleasure, and thank you for supporting the channel. If you haven't already dropped a like on the video, I really would appreciate it, and if you could subscribe to the channel as well, I really would also appreciate the kind support. So today's topic of discussion: Arsenal, as we know, have had an interest in a wide player for quite some time. We wanted Raphinha. Raphinha was the number one option for the club. That is who we wanted to try and sign. The reality of the situation is we wasn't able to sign Raphinha. He always wanted to go to Barcelona. And this is a problem because of all of the right wingers that Arsenal could sign this summer, Raphinha represented a genuine great option. Premier League proven, a really good age, a decent price when we were going in for him at the start of around the £40 million figure. Obviously went for a lot more in the end. And, you know, it was just a really good option. Inverted, left-footed, right-sided, all of that. All of everything about Raphinha. Shooting, dribbling, passing, creativity, pressing, even defending. You know, all of that when we did our tactical breakdowns revealed that Raphinha was a great option. The other reality of Arsenal right now is that they've wanted to move on Nicolas Pepe, and they've been very open to the idea of moving on Nicolas Pepe. The problem with that is that his wages of £140,000-ish per week, and the lack of interest from a number of clubs across Europe who so far are unwilling to kind of match what Arsenal want for him, which is around the £25 to £30 million mark. We've had links to Newcastle, we've had links to Sevilla, we've had links to Everton, Leicester have all been linked as well. Lyon, Lille, and Marseille have all linked in the past. But despite these links, nothing so far has happened at this stage. And that's a problem because to get in a winger, we probably have to move out Nicolas Pepe. Now, there's also another problem. The third part of this conundrum is that the potential options to bring in is the trickiest part of this. It's who you go for. Who do you pick to bring in as the replacement? Now, there are a number of kind of factors associated with this. Arsenal have gone down a different route regarding their recruitment. 2 seconds. I need to stay hydrated during this chat. Arsenal are going down a brand new route with their recruitment. They want quality. They want progressive players. They want youth, and they want players that are going to improve what we've got. They also want players that are versatile, and that is certainly a big factor. And I think for my money, if we are going to bring in a wide player, they have to be able to cover somewhat the central area. Because at the moment we have Jesus and Nketiah. Balogun looks like he's leaving on loan. Martinelli could potentially be another option in the middle. But right now, we don't really have anything else. You could argue that Smith Rowe, Fabio Vieira could be like false nines, potentially. But the reality of the situation is that we don't really have that much depth centrally. And I don't see us signing a striker. Some people put forward the argument that potentially we could sign a striker and Jesus could provide more kind of depth in a wide area. But then you're not really giving yourself the opportunity to rotate between Saka and Jesus. You're not giving both of them opportunities for rest. If you're giving a rest to Saka for Jesus, then you're really giving him enough time off the field. Are you able to use Jesus and Saka more regularly? And so this is the state of play. And so I put a tweet out earlier on this afternoon, which basically asked the question about who would you go for? Well, actually, I'll read you the exact question that I put out because that'd be more beneficial for everybody to know what I genuinely said. The question was, what right wingers are gettable, the upgrade on Pepe this summer, and who can give us cover centrally, as in that striker position, with the tagline of it obviously being realistic, and who are realistic in this sense. And so of the replies, I've brought together all of those replies of people said, and we've got a list of suggestions that we're going to go through. Not all at once, not one by one. Don't worry, you're not going to be here forever. But our list is here. Quite a lot of players. In fact, we've got, how many have we got there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. 28 options that we've got. We've got Cody Gakpo, Marco Asensio, Gonzalo Guedes, Danjuma, Michael Elise, Nicolas Gonzalez. We've got... who else we got? Nicholas Cornet? Maxwell Cornet is his name. Trossard, Leandro Trossard, Zaniolo, Chukwueze, Ismail Assar, Noah Lang, Madueke, Jagrova, Pedro Goncalves, Pedro Neto, Salai. We've got a Ukrainian winger that I'd never even heard of before called Shigankov. Not heard of him before, but I had to have a little look into him and his history. Florian Kainz, Memphis Depay, Amin Gueri, Wilfried Zaha, Berardi, Shesko at Red Bull Salzburg, the forward, Jarrod Bowen, and Chiesa. These were the suggestions. Now, I am assuming that a lot of you will start throwing in names, of course, that maybe weren't suggested, which is fine, and we can have a bit of discussion at the end of the show about these options. Now, for me, when it comes down to kind of deciding whether or not and where you put these, the first thing is that they have to be a right winger. As a kind of a primary, the main thing is they have to be right-sided and comfortable playing on the right-hand side. If we're moving on Pepe, it's just Saka and Nelson, and we don't know what's going to go on with Nelson. So we need to make sure that the player that we bring in, for me, plays more so on that right-hand side. And so therefore, the players that we can immediately kind of get rid of at this point are Kainz and Neto and Gakpo and Guiri and Zaha and Shesko and Trossard, Cornet and Danjuma. Now, some of these players have, of course, played on the right, and they have history of playing on the right. But the reason why, for the benefit of this, we're just going to move them to one side for now, is that their priority and their primaries aren't on the right-hand side, and they are primarily left-sided players when they are playing, and certainly were last season. The rest of the players still potentially could be in that option. Now, the other part of this is obviously that they have got to be able to play as a 9. We need to be able to have someone that gives us cover centrally, as I talked about a second ago, and be competitive with those central options so that we have a player that's good enough. And that rules out quite a lot. All of a sudden, you've then lost plenty more. And it leaves us with just 4, which are Noah Lang, Jarrod Bowen, Memphis Depay, and Gonzalo Guedes. Now, there may be some discrepancies. I know that of those right wingers that were left, people might say that Berardi could play centrally, Chiesa could, Zaniolo has, but they haven't played, Salai certainly, they haven't played plenty as a striker or in the middle, and they haven't done it successfully. They haven't been, solid goal scorers, whereas Lang and Bowen and Depay and Guedes, all of them 4 have played centrally and have got a good record of scoring goals in the middle as well. Chiesa only played in those wide areas for Juve. And, I know he's played in the middle before in the past, but if we're going to talk about genuine, and if we're looking at Chiesa specifically as well, unrealistic to the max, absolutely unrealistic right now. Juve are not selling unless for a ridiculous fee. Now, of those 4 that remain in Lang and Guedes and Depay and Bowen, 3 of those, Noah Lang is Noah Lang. I have no interest in Noah Lang being at Arsenal. His attitude does not fit in with the culture of the club. Memphis Depay, is of an age profile that I just don't think fits Arsenal. And I don't think would be a player that they're looking to bring in. I also don't think really he can operate on that right-hand side effectively enough should we needed him to. Gonzalo Guedes, it's quite similar. Despite having played on the right, the majority of his time has been played in the middle. He isn't an out-and-out right winger, really. I kept him within this group because he has played on the right, but the majority of his games do come through the middle. And so that leaves us with that one candidate, which is Jarrod Bowen. Now, the problem with Jarrod Bowen is, unfortunately, he moves away as well because his price tag is just ridiculous. Ridiculous. Like, we're looking at upwards, in my view, of around £80 million. I think 80 million odd quid is what you would have to pay to convince West Ham to sell. He is, forget Rice, for me, Jarrod Bowen is West Ham's most important player. And because of that, I just cannot get on board with the idea of Arsenal going out and spending 80 million quid on a player that doesn't start for us. You know, Jesus and Saka are going to start. Martinelli's going to be on the left. Bowen doesn't even start at this stage. And a lot of these players don't. In fact, I'd probably bet that most, if not all of these, don't start right now for Arsenal. Perhaps Gakpo on the left-hand side potentially starts for us. Zaha, you know, on the left-hand side probably starts for us. But those players aren't offering us the right-hand side depth that we need. And that's why they were included in that first group of players. And this is the problem that we have right now, is that if we get rid of Pepe, the options that are out there are either too expensive, not specific enough, not competitive enough, not of the right age profile. There's just not the options. Despite all of these names being thrown out, and that's why I asked for suggestions early on today, despite all of these names being discussed, if we're being very, very honest, the names that we are talking about are either not worth the investment, don't give us the quality that we need in the positions that we need for the player that we're bringing in, don't fit the culture of the club right now in the case of, say, Noah Lang, or just aren't of that profile. And I just can't get my head around at the moment what would be the point in investing money into a player to replace Pepe that potentially in a year's time we regret investing in. One of the big things about Arsenal over the last 2 to 3 summers is that we've tried to make decisions in the market that we don't necessarily regret. Have they all worked out? No. You know, Willian, Marie, Cedric, Runarsson are certainly examples where it's not worked out. But they are, on the whole, ones that happen toward the start, if not actually right at the start of Arteta's tenure. The signings more recently, you know, are pretty good. You know, even Tavares, that's going on loan to Marseille, will come back as a player that I think will be worth more than what we invested in, around that £7 million. Lokonga, I like, you know, probably on the lower end of the success scale of players that we brought in so far, but I like him. And Arsenal aren't going to invest money in a player unless they know that they're going to be impacting us and impacting the quality of this team. Despite that, I didn't want to be all doom and gloom and say, look, all your suggestions are rubbish. I didn't want to do that. And so therefore, of all of this group, there are still 4 that stand out for me as potential options for Arsenal to look at. Of all the players on this list, 4 stand out as realistic options of a price tag that I think would be reasonable and that could certainly add quality to the team. First and least appropriate would be, for me, Cody Gakpo, because he plays on the left-hand side. I like him, don't get me wrong, but because I think we've got greater needs on the right-hand side, Gakpo doesn't necessarily fulfill that for us. But there is an argument that Martinelli could be more depth for us on the right-hand side, and Gakpo coming in to compete on the left would work a bit more. Gonzalo Guedes is a really interesting one. You know, when this was suggested, I initially kind of batted it away, but the more I reflected on the idea of Gonzalo Guedes, he plays centrally. He has played in a wide area. He scores goals. He's in mid-20s now. I think you could get him for around £30 million. Wouldn't necessarily be wildly expensive, and I don't think that is. And he's an interesting type that I actually think, and especially because of his verticality as well, gives you a little bit more physical and height in the team too. So he's an interesting one. And with Valencia's interest in Lucas Torreira, perhaps there's something that could go down in terms of a deal there. The other is Pedro Gonçalves. I've talked about him a lot on the morning shows and think that his versatility on the right and left-hand side, he's played as a second striker, and there's potential for him to play more centrally and perhaps more in an advanced role as well, more centrally. I see a lot in him. I see a lot of quality in him. And the last one, who is, I think, my favourite, despite, again, not necessarily being the out-and-out right-sided player, and I think this leans into the idea of moving Martinelli onto that right-hand side, is Amin Guiri. Really versatile, driven, young, great profile, great mindset. I think he would suit the physicality of the Premier League. Good technical player, creative as well as a goal scorer. I think he's a really interesting profile of player as well. So there are these options. Now, Arthur says in the chat box, Arthur, Tom, you can also say everything that we've said about Pepe. And you're absolutely right. We could. We could say that Pepe is not good enough, that we should be looking for better. And whilst I agree that we should absolutely be looking for better, the reason why there is the argument that we should stick with Pepe is because Pepe's not horrific. Pepe is not terrible. He's not a bad player. He's just not necessarily good enough for what we're looking for right now. But the problem is if you move him on for whatever, who knows, we may even have to move him on loan at this stage because the interest coming in for him is next to nothing right now. You're then going to have to invest money to replace him during a transfer window that doesn't necessarily give us the best options available. That in a year's time, in the summer, we could go big and invest in someone who could be really transformative that we might not be able to invest in because we decided instead to rush this position and bring it in during this transfer window. And that's the crux of the debate, is do you potentially risk missing out on signing someone really good for a marquee fee in 2023 because you jumped the gun and you went for a player that didn't necessarily give us what we needed to the level that we needed because we needed just to bring someone in this window? And that's the debate. And that's where we're going to create the poll for today's show. And this is what I want the answer to. The question being, option A, option A is go now, buy now, even if it isn't perfect. Now, so you can listen to me typing. Option B is ultimately, wait and buy the marquee option next summer. They're your two options. So you've got to now vote. Do you want to go for A or do you want to go for B? Well, who is ringing? I bet it's the missus whilst you guys are voting. Oh, it's not the missus, to be fair. It's someone else. But I'm not free right now. I'll ring back later. Yeah, so they're your two options in the chat box. Place your votes. Do you say go now, buy now, even if it isn't perfect, as in, one of these options that could potentially compromise us getting in a player of real perfect quality next summer, or wait and buy the marquee option next summer? Option A, of course, means that we keep Pepe too. It's important to point that out. Some interesting voting going on so far. 31% of you saying A, buy now. And interesting, I am surprised. I am very surprised, I'll be clear, that more than 70% now are saying option B. I really thought maybe we would still be on this mindset of going and buying something now, but I'm actually quite surprised and pleased, to be fair, to see that so far we've seen quite a lot of option B still being voted for. Let's get some reactions from you guys joining us in the chat box. Stephen said, did Arsenal really want a right wing, or did Edu just say to Deco, if Barca isn't an option, we could maybe work something out? Yes, Stephen, we did. We really wanted Raphinha, and Edu, of course, had that relationship with Deco, and that would have made a deal easier. But that promise, that temptation of Barcelona, obviously was too big for this scenario at the moment. Hugh says, I still feel like we take the risk and get rid of Pepe. I think keeping Pepe would be a bigger mistake. The issue with this is, as I've pointed out, is that if you don't keep Pepe, you're moving him on now, you bring someone in that isn't necessarily perfect, you add that risk of missing out on someone even better next summer. And that's a potential problem. Teng says, I'm in the middle here. Let's wait and see what the club decides to do. That is also another thing. One of the big things that I think we talked about on this morning's show in relation to a lot of the new sponsorship deals that have come out over the last day is that it is fine to use the words, I don't know. I probably should have put that down as another option. You can choose not to vote. You can choose not to have an opinion. That is also absolutely fine. You don't have to be forced into one of two options. If you don't want to vote, that is your third option. And if you want to be like Teng Vang, fair play. Fair play. Let's go to Sean, who says something that's rarely considered is that the dynamic of this side appears built around versatility. The next summer option may not be a winger. It could be a striker that pushes Jesus and Eddie into wider roles, potentially. Potentially, that's what we do. Who is the marquee signing? I don't see anyone. Amir, it's a good question, but we don't see anyone now because we're talking in 2022. In 2023, it could be potentially that there are other players on the table that are gettable during that window that aren't currently gettable or aren't currently known about, haven't emerged yet from the crowd that we could go for. The likes of Darwin Nunez, etc., weren't really being talked about at this stage, and yet you've seen how big of a price tag he's gone for. So we could be talking in a year's time about very, very, very different players at this point. Angel says, hey, Tom, I think Pepe is going to have a good season. He'll be worth the same now and the same next season. Not sure if he'll be worth the same because, of course, he'll only be down to that 1-year contract next summer, but potentially that's something. Madrid says there is a third option, which is to get rid of Pepe and do nothing. That could also be something that does happen, but the worst option by far out of all of them. So a quick update on our poll. 68% of you, over 100 of you have voted now, saying that you would wait and buy that marquee player next summer. 32% of you saying that you would do it right now, even if it is a potential risk. Fuad says, where is the realistic place for Pepe to go? And this is the question that we don't really have an answer to, is we don't know where Pepe is going to go. We don't know if we can even sell him this window because we don't know if there are the suitors out there that would want to sign him. Let's go to Leandro says, saying we might miss out on a perfect signing in the future is all an assumption at this point. Also, we don't need a big name. We just need somebody that fits our style of play. That's kind of what I mean by a marquee player and the perfect signing. A perfect signing for me isn't a big name. A perfect signing is the perfect option. And there isn't one right now. Jesus was the perfect option for that striker position for me, and I think he's showing how much he is that right now. If we miss out on that next summer because we bought in a really rushed, immature way this summer, then that's going to have a massive impact on what we could have been like next summer. And there's no guarantees that we'd be able to do that. Gunataj says, roll the dice and see what Marquinhos and Nelson can do with Pepe, of course, next season. Matthew says, Tom, I raised the prospect of keeping Pepe with you before, and you rightly pointed out that we need to get players out if we want to sign another mid or striker. We do. I think in terms of central midfield, Maitland-Niles and Torreira, they're the two that you would look to move on. I don't think a striker's coming in this window, and that's why I said we need to buy a wide forward that can play in those positions if that's what we're going to do. And whilst at the start of the window, I was all for it. And to be honest, I was looking at players like Gakpo and going, go out and get Gakpo. But the more that we've been able to think about it, the more time that we've been able to reflect upon it and discuss it, it's become glaringly obvious that the options out there probably don't suit at the moment what we need. And going in and rushing and buying someone that's not suited, doesn't fit with what we've got, is perhaps more damaging and a repeat of the mistakes that we've done in the past. We've worked so hard to stop making those errors, or to mitigate at least the amount of errors that we make in that regard, but ultimately we don't want to make them again now. Anyway, we're going to finish the chat there because that's where we're going to end the debate. I don't really know what more there is to be said other than for the discussion to continue in the comment section and perhaps on other channels if you would like to take it elsewhere and onto social media or in your groups or in your Twitter spaces. This is certainly, I think, a worthy conversation and debate to be had. I'm very interested to see what you guys have got to say on this in the comment section. And of course, I hope you appreciate the work that's gone into putting this kind of discussion piece together. If you have, do drop a like on the video. Do subscribe to the channel if you're new. We'll have one quick check on that poll. 67% of you so far saying you would go with option B and wait. 33% of you saying that you would so far not wait and go for the riskier bet right now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate it. As always, I will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early at the usual time of 8 a.m. to keep you up to date. And of course, we will bring you more reaction to Arsenal's game against Sevilla in their final pre-season match of the summer before the Premier League returns with our opening game against Crystal Palace on Friday. Lots of build up to that and coverage, of course, and we will see you again very, very soon. Have a fantastic Friday evening, and I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Have a good one, and as always, up the Arsenal.